poseł Flanagan.
Mr. Flanagan.
Chairman, it's interesting for someone who's here only a relatively short while to observe the political games that are played, or are required to be played to get the Parliament heard. But on the actual issue of the programme itself, I just find it bizarre that the European Union at this level is organising what children are having for their breakfast when there are massive, massive problems to be dealt with, and these could actually be dealt with at a national level. But really, I think people know that, and I think this is what it is. It is propaganda for the EU. And it needs positive propaganda, you'd have to say, because while we're purporting to be feeding and keeping the children of the European Union healthy with alms from, well, the top table, at a state level, those children who are trying to get breakfast together through their parents are basically paying back socialised bank debt. So it's a great plan for propaganda for the EU. It's a bit like, well, it's like back to the old USSR. You're spreading it around after robbing people initially. Wonderful games to be playing anyway. I hope you enjoy them. We've had programmes for a long time from the EU, and if they're that brilliant, how come they're not working that well for us? I think you're right, there are problems with obesity around Europe, but I don't think people should be pointing fingers at anyone, because I don't think that's fair. Because at the end of the day, you have to account for yourself. But I don't think it's Europe or Ireland that is the reason that this is happening. It's because of Coca-Cola. It's because of massive multinationals that are supported by the Christian Democrats in this Parliament and in this chamber. And their agenda, ramming this down people's throats, is what is causing the problem with obesity. And maybe if we did something to stand up to them, and I don't think we're going to do it through TTIP, where we're going to let them run completely and utterly riot. Well, if you want to do something about it, do something about it there. But don't preach from a high pulpit to people thousands of kilometres away to tell them what their children should eat for breakfast. It should be done at a local level. And we should do a much better job in Ireland. I do my bit. I go out and I try and show a good example by running marathons and training. I hope you do your bit.
It's precisely for that reason that we have to improve the programme. What just said Mr. Flanagan, it shows that it's a necessity to improve the programme, and I think that the agreement that we reached at the European Parliament is in a good way, and will succeed with the support of Mr. Flanagan or without the support. But it's necessary to continue on that way. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now I think after those contributions, we are closer, we are nearing our positions. I actually commend Mr. Flanagan for your slimness, your slim figure. Actually, I envy you personally. I would like to look like you. Now let's move on.
Pan poseł Flanagan, bardzo proszę.
Mr. Flanagan.
You'd be delighted to hear, Mr. Huitema, that I think this is an area that the European Union should be concentrating on. I think it isn't something that could be done at council level. It's something that needs to be done with us all working together. And there are very, very few issues that are more important than this. This is our future relationship with the land. And that is massive. And we all know why. We all eat every day, as that saying goes, if you've eaten today, thank a farmer. But my worry, you mentioned technology and you mentioned drones and you mentioned where farming could go, and I find that exciting. I find it exciting on the basis that maybe technology finally might give the human race more free time to explore the world and not to be working 60 and 70 hours a week. And my fear is, though, that what technology will do, if it isn't controlled correctly, is that it will facilitate the concentration of wealth within even a smaller group of people. And that's my worry. While I do think the technology could be good, but at the end of the day, if it is used and abused to just suit the big person, well then it certainly can't be a good thing. And I think it was probably an urban myth, but when mechanisation and the assembly line really got together in the car industry, I think there was a saying came from one of the work hands that had just been gotten rid of because of new mechanisation. He said robots don't buy very many cars and drones don't drink very much milk. And I don't know, we're going to teach them how to do it in the future, but at the moment I don't think it'd sell too much. So from that point of view, I think we've got to be very, very careful, because we've had lots of innovation in agriculture, and where are we? We're now at a situation where no matter what sector you're in, you can't actually make a living out of it without a subsidy or without some sort of backup. So I think what we should be striving for is innovation in marketing, innovation in building up the small farmer with producer groups to be able to take on what technology is going to bring at it in the form of even more massive companies like Lidl, etc., joining together and making it harder for farmers, no matter how they innovate, no matter how cheap they produce it. Even if you have one man or one woman in control of 100, 200,000 acres with their drones, they still won't be able to make a profit unless we have innovation in the whole marketing area. And we need innovation there, because we've had a lot of innovation, and as I said already, farmers can't afford to pay their way. So whatever innovation we come up with, I hope it facilitates people living in the countryside, which is, well, driverless tractors doesn't really facilitate that, but if we're going to go down that road, let it facilitate people living in the countryside. Because look, I hear one thing you do learn when you're here is that little towns like I come from, everywhere in Europe, they're disappearing. And they are the jewels and the things that make our countries interesting. Dublin is lovely and the capital cities are lovely. But variety, it's all going to disappear unless we're careful with this technology. And I'm terrified of it, because there's something nice about, troublesome and all as it is if you're a townie like me, coming up with a tractor in front of you on the road. The idea that the whole countryside would be denuded. Be careful where we go, because it needs to be progress for people, not just to facilitate one monster, because by God are we making it possible to facilitate monsters at the moment.
Bardzo dziękuję, pan poseł Flanagan.
Thank you very much. Mr. Flanagan.
Thank you very much. I just want to take up the point that Mr. Seliminovich, I think you've actually brought it up twice, actually, and I think it's a very important thing when it comes to CAP, is educating people who are not farmers that this money also ends up in their pockets. And that message has to be sold out there. And when hopefully we come to a decent sort of mid-term review, it's something that I'm going to be attempting, to get people outside farming interested in it. And it's something that comes back to, yet again, the area that I live in. My father was a carpenter, and my mother and many other people who lived in the town used to criticise farmers and say, why are they getting this money? And I think the best line I've ever heard on it, and I think it needs to be put out there, not just for carpenters, etc., was, my father asked my mother, where do you think the farmer who I put in the fitted wardrobe got the money from? And where does the shopkeeper get a lot of their money? And where does the painter get a lot of their money? And where do a lot of these professions get a lot of their money? It's a trickle-down effect. Now, it would be a better trickle-down effect in Ireland if so much of it didn't go to the richest 20%, but that's a topic for another day. But from the point of view of selling CAP, the best way to sell it is to make sure that the general public know that the euro does not end up in the farmer's pocket. The farmer spends every last cent of it locally, and everyone benefits. But I and a lot of other people don't seem to know that, And I think, considering that eating is so important, I think it's amazing that there's such dislike of farmers outside the non-farming community. In fact, it's bizarre. But we need to start selling the message. It doesn't stay in the farmer's pocket. And then we'll sell CAP.